But just because we have these capabilities and because we can deploy such sophisticated technology, it doesn't mean we should do it without regulation, without guardrails. And we also need to bear in mind we shouldn't be creating these tools and technologies to replace human beings. It's all about augmenting these really wonderful and incredible efficient tools to work with humans.
Welcome back to AudioLife, the podcast where we tell your story in your voice. I'm your host today, Carrie Purcell, and today I'm joined by Su Jella. Su is an international speaker, author, and an executive leader in data analytics and AI. She's recognized as a global top 50 innovator in data and analytics, and is also a winner in the Women in AI Awards. She's also listed among the top 25 leaders in Australia with an impressive resume, as you can hear. And she's recently published in The AI Revolution, Thriving Within Civilization's Next Big Disruption. And her chapter is called The Dawn of Synergy, Human and AI. Now, if you've been listening to our podcast, you've heard some of our other co-authors on this collaborative book so far. In Su's chapter, it's really quite a visionary chapter where she explores the transformative relationship between humans and artificial intelligence over the next century. She argues that AI is not just a tool, but a foundational force that will shape the future, much like past industrial revolutions have, and emphasizes the need for synergy, not supremacy. So where AI augments human capabilities rather than replacing them. She does highlight the dual potential of AI. It can either usher in a more just, efficient, creative world, or if misaligned with human values, it can exacerbate inequality, erode privacy, and weaken critical thought. So there are a lot of really important topics that we're going to talk about from her chapter, from probably the hottest topic that we could be talking about right now. We're also going to learn about Su, about her professional background, maybe some of her personal background. So Su, I am so excited for our conversation today, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Carrie, and it's such a pleasure to meet with you, and more importantly, to have your time. It's a very busy life that we all lead today, despite having AI in our lives. And so being able to have this one-on-one time with you, even if it's through a virtual environment, is very precious and very meaningful. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I agree. Now, you're joining us. I mean, as people who listen know, I'm based in Canada. You're joining us from Australia today. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Wonderful. And again, we're going to dig into your chapter. We're going to talk about your professional background, some of your accolades. Before we get there, tell us a little bit about, where were you born? And I sometimes like to ask if there's a story behind your name.
Sure. So I think I'm a bit of a nomad. I was actually born in India, but I never lived there. I never grew up there. I don't have any experience actually living like they do in India because I grew up in South Africa. So I spent, a good majority of my life in South Africa, but all of my adult life in Australia. So a lot of people tend to wonder what my accent is, and I love them to keep guessing. It's a bit of a mix. I don't really know what accent I have. I think I've neutralized it a bit, but I could be very wrong in that. But yeah, I lived all over South Africa, and my dad traveled a lot. And yeah, came from a background which is, not very unusual or anything like that. But I've had, some really good opportunities to grow and explore from a young age. I think I'm very grateful for the experiences my parents gave to me. And all those experiences have definitely shaped where I am today and what I want to do with my knowledge, my experience going forward into the future. So all of that has definitely shaped my thinking. And being in Australia, it's really just like a lift and shift from South Africa to Australia because the environments are so similar, and there was really no weather adjustment for me. It's very much the same season all throughout the year in both hemispheres, in both locations, because we are the southern hemisphere. So, it's been a really interesting 10 years, if I can reflect on that. Most importantly, because my journey has been within data and AI predominantly in the last 10 years. And to now see it grow to where it is now is unbelievable. 20 years ago, I would have not thought I would be doing or leading AI, or that it was in my journey, but it kind of happened, and it's been so interesting. And I'm really grateful for what I've been able to do in this field.
Yeah, absolutely. And what an interesting time. Your chapter in our recent book, The AI Revolution, looks forward almost 100 years, at least encourages us to start to look forward about 100 years. But looking back in the past 10 years, it's been incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit, and thank you for that background, because I think a lot of our listeners hear, these big titles, these big successes, these awards, and they're like, well, how did it happen? How did that person accomplish that? How did they get there? How can I do it myself? And so thank you for some of that kind of personal background. Let's talk through your career path over, you pick, but maybe the last 10 years is sort of that kind of important shaping time. So give us a bit of that background, please.
Sure. So I guess when I started my educational background, I had a very different plan when I was growing up. Kind of wanted to be everything from a doctor to an engineer to a lawyer. And I thought, I could be this one person who could do it all. Not possible. But, we all grow up thinking, we can be superwoman or superhuman. But no, that doesn't quite happen. So I ended up actually doing a commerce degree. And my specialization was in marketing, and I absolutely loved it. It was one of the most interesting and creative, as well as really thought-provoking courses. And it's one of those things where when a person who's not familiar with marketing meets another marketer, they automatically assume it's sales and advertising. But it's actually not. It's got a lot to do with psychology and data and behaviors and why people do what they do. And that actually intrigued me quite phenomenally. And so finishing off my degree, I ended up working in pharmaceuticals and FMCG. And a lot of my work was centered around market research, which, lo and behold, is a lot of data. And it's a lot of analysis and insights and manipulation of data sets. But more importantly, understanding the way people do things and why they do what they do. And, as they say, there's a saying that rocks are more predictable than people. It's really interesting when you start looking at data and you start to predict people's behaviors. So that's kind of my first experience in really getting my hands dirty in data and research, and really delving into behavioral experiences and how we can influence mindsets, be it good or bad, but you can influence it if you have sufficient information. And so, that was my experience in South Africa, and I moved over to Australia almost 20 years ago. I can't believe it. Time has flown by. And my first role after doing my master's was in digital marketing. And that was around the time where digital marketing was, the thing you had to be in. And it was the opportunities that marketers were looking for, from connecting databases to starting to understand how people or how customers navigate both the virtual as well as the physical environment. And so starting to look at data from, all those different angles became something I was very interested in exploring further. And that led to many other roles and many other opportunities. I was very strategic about my career. There were specific roles I took that were centered around data because I wanted to get more involved in data, and I could really see that I had a passion in wanting to decipher, analyze, but also see the patterns in data. So I ended up getting good opportunities in CRM, digital, and then those opportunities ended up leading me to more enterprise level roles, which is something that I'm more involved in now, leading enterprises through key initiatives in data. So I basically started off my career working in marketing teams, driving data initiatives. But for most organizations, that's now become an organizational objective. So that obviously led to me getting involved in more enterprise roles. I think just to your question earlier on, how do people do it? I think you have to be very strategic about your career and your ambitions. And sometimes it means taking some risks and being able to massage those risks to work in your favor. So for example, I did a lot of contract roles because I felt the quickest and the best way to learn is to learn at speed, at scale. and be able to learn all sorts of varieties of opportunities leading to the data agenda. And for me, it was really important that I get a variety of data sets under my belt, understand how different industries are solving problems with data, the tools that they're using, and the methodologies that they're deploying. And that actually really helped me in accelerating my career. So that's why I was saying earlier on, the last 10 years have been a pivotal part of my career, because that's when I really learned variety, but I also learned how to solve problems really quickly, really well. And there was a lot of leadership that I had to exercise, and all of that personally, professionally, and within teams, both as a leader and as an individual contributor. So the journey was never easy, and you're always going to question yourself if you did the right thing in making some of these moves. But ultimately, if you're working towards a certain goal, it definitely means you do have to take some risks, and you have to step into uncertainty as well. For the last couple of years, my motto has been, let's learn to be comfortable with uncomfortable. Because that's what you're going to be doing in AI. A lot of it is going to be uncomfortable, because either you don't know, or either you don't like what you're saying. So, or you may like it and you just don't know how to respond to it. So yeah, we're going to have to get very used to being uncomfortable.
Yes. Lots of great advice there. And thank you for being, very open with your journey, some tips around, being very strategic, including taking risks, including looking at contract roles. I thought that was really good advice. It's allowed you to get a very well-rounded experience in data that you wouldn't have been able to accomplish in, let's say, one company for 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And really nice advice for people. It's, it takes courage to take those risks. It's one thing to be strategic and look at the plan. It's another thing to jump in, to dive in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think before we move on from that, I just want to ask a little bit about challenges and successes, because certainly there must have been both along the way.
Yeah. The challenges are that, personally and professionally, is that you're trying to navigate change at scale. And so, every time you make a change, you have to navigate it, you have to adapt to it, and then you have to make sure that you find a comfort zone in that change. Noting that...
In the discomfort.
Exactly right. You
Yeah.
have to find a spot where you are comfortable being able to provide solutions, being able to find what you're passionate about. And it's been something where I would always question, am I doing the right thing going into data? There's just so many data professionals out there, and at the moment, every second person is maybe an AI professional as well, or every second startup is an AI startup. How do you declutter from all of that? And, how do you distinguish yourself? So there have been a lot of times where I've just been so uncertain about whether I'm doing the right thing. But yeah, those challenges taught me a lot about resilience, but also finding my USP. And for those in your audience who are not sure what USP means, it's your unique selling factor. It's your unique selling prototype, right? And that's what I had to find. And so I worked hard at, really defining my brand, understanding what my personal brand stood for and what it should stand for and what it will stand for in the future. And what I found in my passion is that I actually learned a lot by sharing. So when I started to share my experiences and share what I learned, I also ended up gaining from others, because there was that transparency in that relationship, or there was that transparency in that conversation. And so, the human aspect of being connected really resonated well with me. So part of the challenges brought through many successes. And so by being a bit vulnerable about what my uncertainties were, I was actually able to become a lot more courageous, but also a lot more confident in what I was doing and knowing that I was on the right path. That may not be the path for everyone, but you do have to find something that helps you define your brand, and more importantly, define your passion. And so now, if you ask me, will I change my profile or my field? I'd be like, probably not, because I absolutely love what I do. And I've also found so many different branches within data and AI and digital that does not require you to be a software engineer. And I'm not a software engineer, but it actually requires you to be a critical thinker And it means that you also should be able to stretch and massage what you're doing into a way that resonates with the people you interact with, be it your customer or be it your colleague. And so I found that's now come out a lot strongly because I did all the different roles of being a data expert. I have been an analyst, I have coded, I have built data sets and databases, but I found my passion was actually delivering the message through data to my audience in a very creative and insightful way.
Wonderful. I'm remembering as you're speaking, I'm envisioning that girl who thought that you could be a doctor and a lawyer and an engineer and everything, and then saying, "Oh, it's not possible." But actually, I think you have done it just in your
Oh,
specific
wow.
field. I think you've taken all of those different hats and diversified your skill set and your experience. So really, yeah, really nicely put, really well done, and a lovely example for people with a bit of a roadmap about being very clear about your brand. Searching for your passions in your path, being very open to that risk or being comfortable in the uncomfortable. That is change, right? And you can either wait around and wait until it feels comfortable, or you can be leading that change and it's a little bit uncomfortable, the unknown.
It is.
Yeah.
And will continue to be, which is, one of the things I mentioned in my chapter as well, is we assume this is what the future is going to be like. It may not even be like that. We don't know. But we have to be, comfortable with the fact there's going to be a lot of uncertainties, even just within the next 5 years. And we're going to have to learn to navigate it.
Absolutely. And we'll dig into that more because, even with that uncertainty, understanding how to navigate that safely, responsibly, ethically is incredibly important. And you talk about that. But just before we jump into your chapter, I want to ask you, share something about yourself with us that we won't be able to learn from your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, probably people don't know. I love dancing. And I love music that makes me dance, actually. But also, I have a very diversified music interest in a way, which is I can go from, pure classical and jazz to Zumba within, an hour. That's it. So I do really like music that makes me dance. And something I am hoping to learn in the next 12 months is to play the guitar. My husband gave me a gift as a guitar for my birthday this year. And so it was something I've been wanting to do for years. So learning to play the guitar is something on my agenda for sure.
I love it. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's helping me round out the little girl with all of the ambition to the woman who's been able to diversify her career to just a little bit of a dancing Sue, in the morning, at night. And by next year, hopefully you'll be playing a song for us on the guitar, which I'm sure you will. I trust you will.
I'm trying my best. That's no pressure at all for me.
Okay. So let's shift a little bit into author mode. As I mentioned, Sue is one of the authors of what has quickly become an international best-selling book. Her chapter I mentioned is The Dawn of Synergy, Human and AI. Sue, in roughly 60 seconds, give us that overview of what your chapter is about.
My chapter is really about embracing AI and technology and being excited about it, and also knowing what we can, do and how we can stretch the human mind into technology. But just because we have these capabilities and because we can deploy such sophisticated technology, it doesn't mean we should do it without regulation, without guardrails. And we also need to bear in mind we shouldn't be creating these tools and technologies to replace human beings. It's all about augmenting these really wonderful and incredible efficient tools to work with humans. Because as human beings, we are all being caught up in the mundane, in the very routine tasks of our roles or our everyday lives. And we need to be able to stretch our minds away from that. And so having AI replace mundane tasks so that we can actually start to focus on more strategic and meaningful tasks that actually make a difference will really bring about a much more harmonious situation, which is the synergy I talk about. But at the same time, I also talk about the importance of using AI for social good. It's not
Yeah.
always a commercial return. It's not always what the dollar value is, but it is a lot more about how can we use this capability that human beings have created to actually socially reform the world and support developing countries and support people who are less privileged than what we are, using these tools to actually uplift their lives. And that's
Yeah.
the kind of dialogue I want us to start thinking about.
Yeah.
And yes, it's absolutely important to have an economy and to generate income and to generate wealth. But we should also be looking at the corporate social responsibility that we have with AI and technology. And that's the synopsis of the chapter I've written.
Excellent. We'll dig into some of those aspects a little bit further. So I want to emphasize, as you introduced and you write in your chapter, the idea that AI can augment humans, human capabilities, human tasks. You also talk about the duality of AI. So it has this potential to really uplift humanity and our work, but also to deepen inequality. So let's pause on that one for a moment. What are some of the biggest socioeconomic red flags that you're seeing right now in global AI adoption?
Actually, quite a bit. We are already talking about AI and how, AI is going to be a part of our lives, whilst, 70% of the world cannot afford food. Or if they can't afford food, there's a big segment of society that do not have connectivity to the internet. They're probably still using dial-up internet or not even that. And so, there's only really 20 to 30% of the population that's benefiting from all these capabilities that are advancing. And what's also happening is that the socio-economic changes that are taking place is that we're building data centers in these locations that do not even have access to data or to the internet, right? So we're using these facilities to keep progressing with people who actually are involved in AI or technology or digital for that matter. So the imbalance is clearly there. And, if we're using the resources of developing countries, why aren't we pushing it back to them? Why aren't we giving them the opportunity to also access these privileges and these technologies to make their lives easier, to create employment, to solve the issue around healthcare, to solve the issue around education? That's what we really need to start thinking about. And so when you look at it from a socioeconomic balance perspective, it is completely imbalanced. And if you just start thinking about those who don't have access to just basic education, there's so much we could be doing when we're using their resources and bringing it back to them. So I go back to the point around corporate social responsibility. As people, even as enterprises that are not that are either not for profit or are listed on stock exchanges, or even social enterprises. There's so much of opportunity to give back to those who are actually helping us, even in an innocent way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, really, really well put. So I think I want to address, you warn about the unchecked evolution of AI and the risks of losing human oversight. So let's talk a little bit about that. Maybe talking about human in the loop oversight. Certainly, you talk about guardrails and regulatory oversight. What are you seeing there?
So many different things, actually. I feel that if we just now maybe take a step back and look at the younger generation, for instance, they're already using AI and they're using tools. It's a part of their lives. Before AI, it was social media. Now it's both. So it's double trouble in a way. And so at a young age, their brains are not being used to their full potential because they're so used to having instant gratification with information that there's no chance for them to now start really thinking about why is 1 + 1, because it's just fed to them. And if I think about when I was growing up and when I was in school, I remember having this conversation with my parents that, I was 12 years old and I was using a calculator. And my dad, who was born in the 50s, he never used a calculator even through uni. And one of the things he mentioned to me when I was growing up is you're going to become really lazy with calculations because you're already using a calculator. And I never quite understood what he said then. But now, as an adult, but also seeing kids who were my age a good few decades ago are doing exactly the same thing with AI. They are not innovating and they're not stretching their creativity because they know if they just write a few words, they'll be able to get, a wonderful image and a wonderful, piece of information created by AI. So again, it goes back to that critical thinking aspect. How much of opportunity are we giving to them to be able to critically analyze information and be able to decipher it and have opinions of their own? We don't know. And the danger with that is that AI also will start to stagnate because it's going to just be rinse and repeating, recycling existing information. At the end of the day, it's a tool. It's not a sentient being. And I know, we can open up a whole other can of worms around making AI sentient. But that's, of course, not the topic of today. But we really need to be careful about what AI is replacing in our daily lives. It's not 1+1, and it should never be 1+1. It should be something that is going to enable you as a person to do more sophisticated thinking and actually solving real problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. You've brought up some really important points, which you talk about in the book. And, research is being studied and is showing that, the use of AI tools can reduce critical thinking. There is, one of our co-authors talks a lot about cognitive offloading, right? So there are benefits to cognitive offloading with repetitive tasks, with things that you can, and in some cases, the calculator is doing that for us, and it's okay if we understand, if we understand what we're trying to accomplish, if we're still in control and accountable and that creative human behind it, sure, we can allow it to do some repetitive tasks for us and augment our work. But there are certainly risks, and I think when you look at the younger generation, as you're describing, how do we as leaders, how do we as educators, maybe as parents, handle that? How do we mitigate those risks with young people?
I think you have to bring in some protocols. Either as a parent or as a teacher, even as teachers, do not rely on AI as much as you are. Because, children or school students will think that it's okay. There has to be some absolute social protocols brought in where technology is an absolute no in the classroom. There's a zero tolerance for technology. But again, that's not a conversation where I can give all the ways in which we can do that. It really needs to come from a community of support from parents, from teachers, as well as government. So recently in Australia, for instance, there's a social media ban for students under 16. And I think that's great. And the reason why that's great is because you're already curtailing their use of technology. And we know through many programs and many incidences in the news that kids who are influenced by social media are not necessarily doing right by it as well. So it is become then a danger to society and to children and to teenagers for that matter. It's only a matter of years before we start seeing AI tell kids you could do this and it's okay, and it may not be okay. And then we'll have to bring in another ban. We shouldn't be waiting for the law to catch up because it'll take a while. We actually need to start bringing in regulation by ourselves and having a zero tolerance policy on these matters. I don't have children, but I am, around a lot of kids, and I see how they use technology. They're really smart. They're really deep in their use of it as well. And many times I feel like I'm falling behind. But yeah, it all starts at a young age, not to be influenced by technology, because when those teenagers become adults, and if they have to operate in the corporate environment or in a different environment, the way they actually start to interact will be very different. It's also a really interesting topic because a few years ago, there was a study done on the eyes of children, actually, and the fact that children are becoming more susceptible to eye conditions and disorders because they started using screens at a much younger age. And this was already done before AI was a thing, as in generative AI was a thing, rather. And that is actually very scary. If you're looking at the lifespan of an individual from 1 to maybe 80 or 70 or 80 years, that deterioration will happen gradually, but it will happen. So instead of having the eyes of a 20-year-old, you might end up with eyes of a 50-year-old, and that's very scary. So even those little things that we take for granted need to change because technology is an enabler, it's not a replacer. So using technology correctly becomes a really important facet of our lives as well.
Yeah, a lot of really, really important examples and thoughts there. So great answer.
And now for a word from our sponsors. Ready to share your stories and life philosophy, or capture those of a parent or grandparent? Or maybe a corporate package is right for you to build connection across your workforce and add value to your clients. Visit audiolife.io today to learn more. Our listeners will get 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. AudioLife, where memories find their voice.
A few points that I think I just want to emphasize. Technology is moving at a pace it's outpacing regulation right now. We are being reactive. We're being reactive to risks and harms that we didn't necessarily anticipate. It's particularly risky when we involve children, younger people. And it is something we have to take very seriously. As exciting as it is, all of the evolution that's happening, how quickly things are being evolved and available to us, it is something that we need to really make sure that human oversight, that accountability, that regulatory consideration is proactive, is actually at the forefront. I know it's something we're talking about. It's definitely something that we're behind on. As a part-time professor, I can give a little bit of perspective from the educator side now. I am dealing with older, third and fourth year university students. But the way that the schools have handled AI is very reactive, right? We had a year of just uncertainty. Then OpenAI was one of our first, guidelines, not a policy, not regulation, just a guideline. And then about a year later, the school came and said, okay, you have 3 choices for your guidelines. You can have no AI, you can have partial AI, or you can have full AI use. It's up to the professor, it's up to the assignment to decide. Now, in addition to that, professors or educators are in the position of having to and should be proactively, not reactively, rethinking what kinds of assessments and assignments we're giving in order to allow, to your point in your chapter, allow AI to augment or allow the human to completely control the task, but not allow the human to completely offload it to AI, whether with or without permission, and reduce that critical thinking again and hand in something that really doesn't have value for anybody. But we're still talking about our youth. It's incredibly important that we're intentional and proactive with how they're developing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because it's a scary thought if you consider giving AI all the power. And yeah, when we give AI all the power, it'll probably be at a point when it's in a different state of maturity. Probably not right now in the current state. But even then, which is something we explore in 100 years from now in my chapter, is when you give all the power to something or someone, you basically, choose to not make decisions yourself. And that can be a very dangerous thing, If I think about, for example, healthcare, if you're leaving AI to make a decision about your health, is that really the right approach that we should be taking? I think there's many other things AI could do. It could inform you about your health. It could give you statistical details about your health, which are not easily identifiable. But it shouldn't be the decision maker of your health. That should be you. You should always have a point in your little paradigm, in your little space, to be able to make that decision. And that's when it starts to get scary, is allowing AI to make decisions. And you read the news all the time, this tech company has laid off 70% of their staff. And another tech company has done the same thing. And what people are missing in that conversation, or what the media is perhaps missing in that conversation, is they're not really saying why they're getting laid off. Is it because really AI has replaced mundane jobs, or it's actually replaced decision-making jobs? And that's the question I always have. Which job has it replaced? If it's a really mundane job which doesn't require a lot of critical thinking, fine, fair enough. Jobs have been replaced forever time, for eons. But if you are replacing decision makers with AI, that is a very dangerous move, because it's not mature enough. It never will be able to replace a human being. And we do not want to end up in a society where it's, like the theme says, cyberpunk and cyber feuds, where, we're fighting technology that we've created. That is not the kind of future we want to live in. We, again, need to be able to use technology for socially good reform, and to actually enhance and give us more time in our lives to spend with our families and spend doing things that we love, versus doing the mundane tasks that are not allowing us to be strategic and critical thinkers.
Yes. So you brought up earlier the idea of innovation, right? That AI can help us enable innovation further. I want your views on the balance between regulation and innovation,
Mm. Yeah,
right?
it's a really good point, because it's come up many times in many discussions this year. Does being regulated mean that you curb innovation? No, it just means you have guardrails in which to work in. I mean, let's be realistic. The army, the military, the navy, they always have access to the most sophisticated technology, right? If they didn't have guardrails, don't you think it would just go rogue? That anything and everyone could just basically be obliterated within a second? And is that the kind of life we want to lead if the military have those sorts of control? No, we don't. And they do have controls, because we all exist, and we exist in a time where there's good and bad things happening at the same time. But we also exist in a time where human life is actually precious, and there is concern and there is thought for citizen safety. So we do not need to think that regulation will curb innovation. It actually should allow you to start thinking more innovatively with the guardrails in place. But also it allows you to, test the boundaries to a certain limit. We shouldn't be overstretching our limit. And that's with anything in life. They say drink in moderation, eat in moderation. Why do we have those moderation caveats? Because anything over the limit is never a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, really, really good examples. I mean, unfortunately, with the last ones, I have to say, but do we always eat with moderation? But what happens on that day that you have too much birthday cake or whatever it is? How do you feel the next day? But yes, really, really great examples for us to be able to look at. Again, high stakes with military, maybe lower stakes with having too much birthday cake. That was my example.
Yeah.
I won't go in the middle. The middle gets messy. So there's a lot that we haven't talked about yet in the chapter. I mean, this conversation is intended to give people a little more than they're going to get, to whet their appetite for some things that are in there that we haven't shared. I want to switch a little bit. I want to ask, as you were writing the chapter, and my guess is there must be something here. Was there anything that you wrestled with or debated? And again, maybe you got to a place you were comfortable and you put it in the chapter. Maybe you left it out. Maybe you're not ready to answer it yet. What are those areas that you're still kind of wrestling with or debating? And again, maybe the process of writing allowed you to solve it and put it in there.
I don't think I've solved any specific problem I was seeking out or that I want to solve as such, but maybe I'll take a step back and answer that question in a different way. So the reason why I actually wrote the chapter and I was passionate about it was because I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I love sci-fi and I love technology, and I try and watch all the sci-fi movies that come out, and it gets me very excited about what's out there in the future. And one of the mentions I do make in my chapter is about Star Trek. So growing up, I've loved Star Trek Voyager, one of my favorite sci-fi series. And interestingly enough, it was written in the 90s, produced in the 90s to the early 2000s. And there's an episode in Star Trek that talks about deep fakes. And lo and behold, we have so many deep fakes everywhere, all around. And I recall watching that episode when I was young, and I was like, really, can that happen? Now, that's probably another few centuries away. And you know what? It was just 20 years later. And so many concepts from Star Trek are actually happening now. And so, of course, if you're a Star Trek or a sci-fi fan, you'll definitely notice a lot of that. That was actually the inspiration for the chapter, is to reflect on what did writers and creators think about when it came to sci-fi and predicting the future versus what's actually happening now. And then that inspired me to think about, okay, where to from here in the next 100 years, probably the next 200 years even. And that's kind of what brought about the chapter around, we could really do a lot, and we could do a lot of things that are good, but we can also create a massive mess. And so that was really the inspiration. And then I took a step back, and the question I asked myself is, instead of just thinking about technology as a way to look like we're educated or that we're advanced or that we're civilized, why not look at technology in a way that actually helps us to improve as individuals, to stretch our abilities as people? Because, we have the capacity of so much life and so much ability to create a being that's not sentient, like a robot or AI. So just imagine how intelligent we are as humans and what we could do with that intelligence, right? It's said that, a human being is made up of approximately 60 billion neurons. And if we're trying to think about replacing 60 billion neurons with programmatic code and algorithms, you can probably spend an entire lifetime and never actually ever get there. Instead of actually thinking about replacement, let's think about augmentation. How do we do this together? How do we work in synergy? How do we work parallel to each other? And that's sort of the inspiration of the chapter for me. The things I'm still trying to work out is how can I inspire and influence others through this chapter to really think about AI as a tool to make life easier, not as a tool to make us lazier or to replace us. Because, we've got all these wonderful appliances and technologies that, possibly our parents and grandparents never had. But the one thing we all are struggling with, especially in the last 5 years, is time. We still don't have time, and we still don't have time to read or, to experience your hobby or stretch your hobby. And so if AI is going to become a part of that aspect of our lives, then we should be doing more creative things or start spending more time with our families, travel a bit more, exercise a bit more, have well-being, do meditation, all those wonderful things we talk about, but we just are so time poor about. And so that was one of the things I'm trying to address through the chapter is, if we're bringing all of this into our lives, we're not replacing jobs and we're not replacing income, but we should be replacing our time with more valuable activities. And that's something I feel like we really need to focus on quite deeply.
Yeah, excellent. Really, really well put. I'm in the camp of believing that AI, won't replace humans, but humans with AI will do more than humans without AI. And I've always, I have the growth mindset, right? If you can apply AI, again, it doesn't have to replace you, it shouldn't. But how much more can you do? How much more can you grow? If you had 20%, I always find, any professional that you speak to, any worker that you speak to, if you ask them, if you had 20% more time in your work, what would you do with that? We always have this long list of things that we would do if we had more time. And if AI can help open up that time, we should be doing that. We should be more productive. We should be looking at growth. On the personal side, it's a dream to think about opening up more time for reading, for exercising, for social, for all of those things that we just, we can't find enough time in the day. I also appreciated, there are, as there should be in this conversation, there are lots of references in your chapter to sci-fi. And as I was reading it, I wondered, is this just an appropriate analogy, or does this person love sci-fi? So I love that I hadn't explicitly asked you, so I appreciate that you told us that. A few things I want to pick up on from what you just said. You do talk about looking forward about 100 years. You talk about the potential, if we're in that sci-fi realm, we've used other language to talk about this already today, but we have a dystopian future and we have a utopian future. Which one are we going to build, and how are we going to do it? Sci-fi and 100 years out is kind of a safe way to think about it. If there's enough distance there.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll pause and let you just respond to that one.
I'd like to be positive and say we have more of a utopian future ahead of us.
I hope so.
So I try to be very positive. So I'm going to try and hope that we have a utopian future. But in saying so, the dystopian future can very easily creep in, right? And if you just look at what's happening now, with most people concerned about their jobs and where they're going to be in the next year, how they're going to pay for things, cost of living, and then you start listening to news again about AI replacing jobs without any clarity. It seems very bleak. And then you have a lot of Gen Zers entering the market and complaining that they're not able to get a job. But then on the other hand, if you look at the other side of the coin, you have people starting their own organizations because they've got the skills with AI. They've learned AI, they've employed it, they've started thinking about how can I use AI resourcefully. And then, I think in the last 10 to 30 years, we've probably had the highest number of millionaires and billionaires enter into the world compared to the last 50 or 100 years, right? I mean, 50 years ago, to be a millionaire was a big thing. That's nothing now. But now, beyond that, people are building enterprises using technology and, really creating efficiencies. But again, it is very narrow. It is a very small percentage of people. The broad majority of people do not have access to all of that, and their futures seem very, very uncertain, which is then, again, siding more towards the whole dystopian thinking. So again, we have a lot of opportunity as people to influence and change that agenda. And so we have to work together to try and ensure that we're seeing a utopian future rather than a dystopian one. And we really need to move away. We need to shift that thinking from being very capitalistic to being a bit more social enterprise driven and more economically driven for the greater good of others. Again, I don't want anyone to misunderstand that, we shouldn't be looking at opportunities to drive revenue. We should. But it is not only about revenue. There is an opportunity to do a bit more than revenue. Yes, we all need to live. We all need an income, but it's not just a capitalistic mindset, right? So we do need to just think a little bit further about creating that utopian future with positive initiatives that can actually enhance our lives.
Absolutely. Good. What is a favorite personal use of AI?
Ooh, this is giving away some trade secrets, yeah? So like I mentioned earlier on, I love to dance and, I love music, but I'm not artistic in any sense. So I cannot draw. My best form of drawing is stick figures. So that's the closest I've ever gotten to drawing. So my favorite love for AI is to generate images. And so that's the best use of AI for me. And that's what I predominantly use it for, is to create images and just to see it happen in the mindset of Sue, If I can imagine it, can I draw it? And so that's really my best use of AI. So that's my trade secret given away.
Wonderful. I'm going to start to look at everything that you post that's out there and just sort of, but I also trust that it's your creativity, that you're directing it, that it's your ideas, that you're
exactly.
Delegating.
If you put it in that sense, you have to be creative about your prompts as well. You wouldn't know how many prompts it took me to get that image in.
Exactly. We talked earlier about time, not having enough time for everything. How do you balance all of your professional pursuits and your personal?
You're going to get a very different response if you ask me and if you ask someone outside of me.
Good, yeah.
Let's just say I am someone who is very good at getting stuff done at the last minute. So if it wasn't for the last minute, probably something wouldn't get done. So
yeah.
I work well under pressure.
Good. Yeah, I love the reality of it. We don't have enough time, but sometimes that time can add enough pressure to get what you need to done. I find even if you're not, when I try to coach more junior employees, right? And we're looking at how to prioritize time and how to anticipate, tasks and how all of these things. I always think to myself, if you just if you had to get it done in this much time, you would get it done, right? You would get an adequate or maybe better than adequate version done. And if you could do that enough, you would start to learn how to really prioritize, how to really be efficient. But also, thank you for the honesty.
No problem at all. I actually learned something recently from a professional peer who mentioned something about me being busy. And they said, well, don't worry. If you give a busy person something, they'll get it done. Doesn't matter when they get it done, but they will get it done. And then I was like, actually, yeah, that's my new quote for the year. If you give a busy person something, they'll get it done. So that's kind of how I balance it out. I'm not saying it's right for everyone. So far, it's worked.
Yes. Good. Amazing. I'm going to ask you something else that you brought up earlier. I don't know if this is something that you want to share. So if it's not, you don't have to. You mentioned that you're not a parent, right? You have a lot going on professionally, you have a lot going on personally. Was that an intentional choice? Is there a story there that you feel like sharing with our audience?
There probably isn't much of a story there. It was just an intentional choice. I just made a choice that it was a different lifestyle that I wanted to lead. And I guess I got very involved in my career, and I felt that if I was ever to become a parent, I need to give 200% to my family. And it just so happened that life happened and my career happened. And then, time went by, I got older, and then I realized I just probably can't handle having a family and a career. And I wasn't in a position to, to make that change. It was never pre-planned. It was never something I thought about growing up that, I never want to be a parent. I never want to have kids. It was just something that happened with life, and it's a decision I made. But I think some of those decisions that we've made as a couple as well has gone into, intentional thinking about the future and the state of the world and things. And, it works for some, it doesn't work for others. For us, it wasn't something we wanted to get involved in. We just felt, the world is a very difficult place right now. It was difficult for us, and it's getting more difficult. And maybe we're just not ready for something like that, for really young children. It opens up a whole different conversation, and it's a whole other topic on its own. I don't know if I'll regret it in 20 years. I don't. But where I am right now, I feel comfortable that we made the right decision for ourselves. And, it's not necessarily something everyone else would agree with, but we felt it was the right decision for us. And in saying so, though, we love kids. And we absolutely love spending time with them, our immediate family or friends. But, it's different when you are the responsible parent.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for all of that. I think it actually is a really important conversation. Early in the AudioLife catalog, you'll hear my personal AudioLife podcast as well. I talk a little bit about my experience. I appreciate you sharing because it is an example that people need to see, to know that they have options and choices, to be able to, to make the choices that make sense for them intentionally. And so, I know it can be a touchy topic for some, but I think it's important that we talk about it. So thank you for letting us. Where can people learn more about your work or connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and if you purchase the book, you'll find my contact details there towards the end of my chapter. And that's another way to connect with me as well. And I guess once you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to have a chat and talk more about, leadership, your career or my career, whether it's AI, digital, technology, transformation. So there's a lot of topics that are of interest. And if you have any tips on learning to play the guitar, that's also.
Wonderful. So again, Su's chapter is chapter 13, The Dawn of Synergy, Human and AI. And again, that was the AI Revolution book, which we've talked about a few times on this podcast so far. It's a collaboration of authors all around the world, experts in AI, all in different domains from different perspectives. And once I got involved in this project, I knew that I was connecting with these really, really incredible people that had insight, they have vision, they have stories to tell and share. And because that's what we do on AudioLife, we really wanted to share some of those stories with you as well. So, Su, we've talked about a lot. I still have questions for you, but given time and how generous you've been with your time, I will stop my questions for today. I just want to put it back to you and say, was there anything else that you really wanted to share or key takeaways that I haven't asked you about that you haven't had a chance to share yet?
I think the key takeaways are when it comes to technology, AI, and data is that we need to move away from the thinking that it's, a technology responsibility, or that, you have to come from an engineering or a coding or a programming background.
Yeah.
Because gone are those days where, you have to be a pure technical expert. You actually have to be much wider than that. Having the technical expertise is a huge benefit because you really understand the granular level of detail. But even without that, there is so much human value in bringing together the opportunities like technology and data and AI. And as we start to shape our lives and organizations start to embed AI into their organization, you really need to think about the different types of people, skills, and talents that need to make that work. And so I know it's probably a common factor that many people would have heard of, but it really does take a village to build
Yes.
AI really in an equitable, ethical, and responsible way. And I think more importantly, we've spoken about this as well already, is don't wait for the law to change. Don't wait for regulation to influence responsible thinking and responsible practices, because there's a lot of opportunity to be responsible with this. I absolutely love AI, but I also know what my boundaries are. And when I use AI, for example, like generating images, I actually test my creative thinking before I use AI. So don't use AI as your first point of call or your first point of finding a solution. Let's try and work through that solution and use AI to refine it. And so start thinking about how you could use AI not as a first point of contact, but maybe your second or third point of refinement and enhancement. Don't replace the abilities that we've been given naturally to exercise our critical thinking, our intelligence, our brain power, because that is not replaceable. And then I guess more importantly, just in terms of things that I've learned, is that you need to have a robust background and a robust capability set when delivering your strategic path. So always try and bring in different ways of stretching your skills and stretching your mindset. That's what's helped me. And that's also what I've really exercised when I wrote this chapter as well, is what are all the different things I could think about, and how do I bring my passion to influence the audience that's listening to you, but also those who read the chapter, and how can I help to make a positive difference? I'm all about impact, but I think positive impact is the most important thing to me. So those are some of my parting takeaways and key points.
Very, very well put. Thank you for that. Again, you can connect with Sue on LinkedIn. I absolutely recommend that you read her chapter in the AI Revolution. So you've been very generous with your time, your insight, all of your experience. For those of you listening, just so that you know, it's past midnight for Sue in Australia, but she's here after a long day, still talking with us. So again, really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate your time as well, and have a wonderful day ahead of you. And I'm looking forward to interacting and connecting more with yourself as well as your audience.
Thank you. I am too. And for those listening to us today, this has been another episode of AudioLife, the podcast where we tell your story in your voice. I've been your host again today, Carrie Purcell, joined by Su Jella. And if you like what you heard, please take a moment to give us a 5-star review, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Thanks, everyone.
If you like what you heard today, consider recording your own AudioLife private podcast or giving one to a loved one for a unique and memorable gift. Today, AudioLife listeners will receive 10% off using discount code GIFT10 and order number AudioLife Podcast. Also, remember to rate our show and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.